is now a true dual threat on the power play, especially because the one-timer is devastating. In his draft year, it was Brendan Brisson who was taking all the one-timers, but this year it was Sean Farrell, and he was doing great. He's just so much fun to watch. Again, a really tenacious player. He's so hardworking. Like Rafael Pinal could be very proud of Sean Farrell's work ethic. And yeah, he has the playmaking, he has the shooting. I see a future second line winger with him. He's great.
Okay, I'm actually going to interject. And well, first of all, I'm very sorry to do this to you, Sebastian, because I know you're
It's
an
okay.
expert. I'm going to correct you on something. If you go throughout the history of the USHL, he is actually the 23rd player in
Oh my
history
God.
in history
What?
to have scored over 100 points or more.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Now,
Where did
now
I get that? Oh,
the
second player in the last like 20 years though, right?
Yeah, okay,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
okay,
If we were
sorry.
talking about
Okay.
this generation though, the last one before Sean Farrell
2011?
was actually Kevin Roy in
Yeah.
2011-12 when he had 104
Yeah.
points. Now the
Okay.
all-time record is in 85-86 with Tim Ferguson scoring a whopping 135 points. That's
Okay.
56 goals and 79 assists. Now, where am
I
I
misspoke though, but in terms of recent
don't okay,
last 20 years, yeah,
don't worry about it.
my
Now,
lifetime.
okay, so you know what? I'm presenting this stat to you, okay? And I was actually pretty wildly, impressed when I saw that column, as a matter of fact, and saying, "Wow, okay, it's impressive," but at the same time, it's not that many. If you look at this list, okay, yeah, the bulk of it was in the 80s, where goaltending didn't exist back then and whatnot. Aside, there's Jason Blake at 22, who had 100 points in 93-94. Aside from Jason Blake, there's not really any NHL around this list. Mike Raz, Mike Carlson, Steve McSwain, Scott Shofstall, Scott Perper. I mean, unless my history is a little hazy. I mean, there's no one really of impact in this list that has actually crafted a legitimate NHL career, aside again from Jason Blake. So, Sebastian, my question to you now is: I understand how, looking at Sean Farrell, there's the work ethic, there's the skills, and like any good prospect, their stats just keep getting better, which is absolutely understandable. However, here's the big question: is this a fluke, or is this guy for real?
Well, firstly, if you look at the list, I think one of the big reasons that you don't see many NHLers there is that the USHL was a very weak league for a very long time. It's now becoming kind of a CHL counterpart in the US. So it's producing a load of NHL prospects. If you look at even like in this past draft, USHL players, it's like the first round is littered with them. Like Owen Power, NCAA player, he was in Chicago the year before. So USHL graduate basically. Tyler Boucher, USHL. He should not have gone in the first round, but he did. So therefore, top 10 talent technically, even though he should not have gone there. But you see a bunch of these players getting drafted really high now because the development curve, it's becoming a very strong development league, and you can't look at like all these stats from like the 80s and see, oh, these are all great tallies, and these players aren't in the NHL, never played in the NHL, and therefore Sean Farrell is not going to play in the NHL because he put up high numbers and whatever, right? Like you can't compare. It's a completely different stratosphere now. And to answer your question, yeah, I do think he's for real. Like you can never really say that any prospect is like a guarantee unless it's like an elite prospect. You always have like top 15 picks that don't make the NHL. Tyler Boucher might be one of them, Ottawa Senators fans. I'm sorry.
Lay
But
off the Pierre Maguire pick already. You love it.
Pierre. I mean, I like Tyler Boucher. He just should not have gone that in the first round. But yeah, like I do think he's for real as a prospect. Is he a guarantee? No, but no one is. He has the foundation. He has standout abilities. He has work rate. He has everything you really want from a player except for size, which is the reason that he fell because he was in his draft year undersized and not the best skater. Therefore, should not go in the top 3 rounds according to NHL scouting departments and GMs. But he is, again, like if you, I'm still looking forward to watching him play in the NCAA because I want to see how he does against older competition. Because this year in the USHL, he's one of the oldest players. I mean, he was old for his draft year, right? Like he's born in like October or November, so he was a really like old player for his draft year. So he, he should not have been playing the USHL this year because he was meant to beat Harvard. But things COVID, right? So weird things happen because of COVID. But he's really good, and especially going to Harvard with not only a great teammate but a friend in Matthew Coronado. It's going to be fun because both of them now have great pedigree, and they're likely going to go into Harvard's top 6 from the get-go, if not the top line, because they have the chemistry and they are like electrifying offensive players. Sean Farrell might not be the most advanced player defensively, but if you have his playmaking ability, his one-timer, his tenacity, you don't have to be dominant defensively, right? Like he tries defensively, and that's going to help him unlock defensive abilities. And the NCAA is a great area to improve that. So I think he is for real.
Just for the final 60 seconds of this segment, Sebastian, a name that keeps popping back up, and you know what? We need to talk about him next week. Matthew Coronado. That's another guy, and Scott is also really, really high on him.
Scott loves him.
Scott loves Coronado. And also, I think at some point we should definitely start discussing maybe the art that is scouting, because, you know, according to scouts, Cole Caulfield is not a top 10 draft pick either. So
big difference there is public scouting versus NHL scouts.
Exactly.
Two very different things.
Exactly. You know what? To be continued, my good friend. Thanks a lot, Sebastian.
No problem.
You're listening to Puck and Roll.
And now for the final segment of the night, we're going to be joined once again by Joshua Rosa and, of course, Sebastian. Hi. Josh has a very, very interesting find. I mean, this guy went digging on the internet for absolutely no reason at all, because I'm guessing it's August and he was probably bored in the middle of a heat wave or something. And I'm seeing him smile and nod. I'm guessing I'm half right about that. However, you know what? He when you start digging a little bit around, you could find some pretty solid gems. In this case, Josh is going to present something to us in regards to the bottom 6 of the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I know we've covered this in episode 2, where we were talking about the depth behind the bottom 6 roles with the likes of Mathieu Perreault, Cédric Paquette, Artturi Lehkonen, etc., Jake Evans, etc., etc., etc. Now, a wonderful statistic was brought up. Josh, once I passed the puck directly to you, like, just tell us where you got this source and what are we doing with this information? The Montreal Canadiens are committing on average $17.4 million in salary for their bottom 6 forwards. Now, we're looking at Mike Hoffman, Jake Evans, Josh Anderson, Lehkonen, Paquette, and Armia. Now, these are obviously interchangeable because Hoffman can become Drouin, Anderson can become Gallagher, Jake Evans can become Perreault, Cédric Paquette can become Paul Byron when he comes back from injury. So that's 17.4 can easily go up to almost $20 million in salary cap for the bottom 6 forwards. So, Josh, first of all, where did you get this information? Because this is absolutely incredible. And what are we to do with this? I mean, is this cause for concern, or does this just mean that, you know what, maybe this is just a new way of managing a hockey team and you just need to spread it evenly amongst 4 lines?
Yeah, so the idea came during episode 2 when you, Patrick, were saying that someone on the 4th line is going to be paid, on the 3rd line is going to be paid over $5 million per year.
Right.
So I thought that sounded a bit odd for the NHL. I thought, how many other teams are like that? What does our bottom 6 stack up to others? So I went to the website Daily Face Off. They seem to have the most accurate, up-to-date rosters and lines, and I didn't change anything. We were all arguing about what the 3rd and 4th line would look like on episode 2, and just to keep it fair, I don't know how the other teams' rosters are made up. I just took the lines that are on there: Mike Hoffman, Jake Evans, Josh Anderson, Lehkonen, Paquette, Armia, and found their just 1 year cap hit on Cap Friendly. So not looking at any extra years, any bonuses, anything like that. It's just the cap hit for the 1 year. And it comes out to 17,400, which is the most out of any NHL team. The second most is Calgary, which is $16,603,333, and that's mostly buoyed by that fantastic Milan Lucic deal that they've got going on down there. The least in the league is, to me, unsurprisingly, Detroit. They've got a young, terrible team, so they don't have the players to really give that money to. And then second last is our friends in Toronto, $6,995,000, just because they have the most expensive top six in the entire league, the most expensive four players. But the good thing is that we have one of the best bottom sixes in the league, arguably the best. So we're really getting what we're paying for with those guys on the roster.
Well, you said we're getting what we're paying for, but at the same time, I can't help but notice Tampa Bay is scrolling near the bottom, having spent $9.1 million for the bottom six, and they just won back-to-back cups. Now, complain all you want, about the the circumstances behind the seasons, but I mean, it's still of note that you have to have your superstars on there, and you have to pay them the big money and whatnot. But at the same time, if I'm looking at some of the teams that spend the most, Montreal being on top, okay, Calgary, Philadelphia, Philly might cause a surprise this year, with all the changes and whatnot. Same with the Rangers every year. Anaheim has a ton of money for a team that's supposedly rebuilding. The Islanders are there. Pittsburgh at $14 million. I mean, it seems that there's no really cohesiveness as to figure out, is it a good idea or not to spend this much money on the bottom six?
Can I just say something quick? For Tampa Bay, that is the money without that dynamite third line that they had of that triplet line. It's the third and fourth line that they have now. So that has Ross Colton, Cirelli, Joseph, Maroon, Belmar, Corey Perry. That's still pretty good bottom six, but not
as effective as what we saw this past playoffs.
Yeah, exactly.
And Cirelli was playing the top six in the playoffs too, so he might be there in reality. But yeah, like you can't really use the Stanley Cup argument with Tampa Bay's current bottom six, because like that Goodrow, Gord, and Coleman line is completely gone, right? So, but yeah, again, it's just different ways that different teams are constructed, and Tampa has a lot of superstars up front that we just don't, at least yet, right? Like I love Suzuki, I love Caulfield. They're going to be great this season, but they're not going to be Braden Point or Stamkos or Kucherov or whoever, right? So different teams are constructed differently, and Montreal is built on forward depth and forward depth alone. Yeah,
I mean, we've discussed through and through, whether or not the Canadians were going to make the playoffs or not. I mean, it almost ended up in a Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania, for that matter, with Elias. And however, there is still that obsession with needing to have two top-heavy lines in the NHL. And I don't know if it's just a way of trying to reinvent the wheel, because it's something that we've seen pretty much throughout Marc Bergevin's tenure in Montreal. For the last 10 years, he's always tried to build a team from the last guy on the fourth line up until the first line. We see it all the time at the trade deadline, trying to get that extra depth, that extra grit, those extra useless old players like Steve Ott, for example.
Ott and Dwight King.
Exactly. But at least it shows that he's always had that philosophy of trying to get those four lines working. Now, Josh, I'll send it back to you. I mean, is it just wishful thinking to think that we could win this way, because some people can almost take the Moneyball story in Major League Baseball